Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're going hunting for POLIWRATH in the Open Ultra League, featuring my XL CLEFABLE teaming up with Wild Charge Double and Shadow Ampharos. As you may know, since the POLIWRATH Comm Day, there's been a pretty sizable meta shift in the Ultra League, and honestly the meta as a whole to me feels pretty weak to XL CLEFABLE. So I decided to test it out and honestly had some really nice sets with it, as it feels like a lot of teams are not preparing for CLEFABLE. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches and go hunting for POLIWRATH in the Open Ultra League. Hopping into the first match, picking up a fairly neutral lead, CLEFABLE into Shadow Walrein. I have two better responses in the back, so I save switch into Double, and my opponent is going to respond with POLIWRATH. I am incredibly happy to see POLIWRATH, as my entire team does very well here. They're running Power Up Punch, so they're now boosted, but they're going to have to immediately surrender a shield as Double has not one but two Wild Charges loaded. My opponent is going to commit the shield, my defense is now debuffed, so they don't really get a lot of energy, and speaking of energy, I can now massively overfarm with the CLEFABLE as I commit to the farm down. POLIWRATH is running Pup and Ice Punch, so they're able to land a boosted Ice Punch, but thankfully Ice Punch not the strongest move ever, so even though it's boosted, CLEFABLE can very comfortably tank 2, and my opponent is actually going to pivot, and they're sending in Drapion. I fire off the Moonblast, that does quite a lot of damage, and I'm going for the Meteor Mash. Even in a matchup where it does have a type disadvantage, look at the work that CLEFABLE puts in, and from here, Shadow Ampharos just wins this game. They go for the crunch, hoping for the farm down, but it's them who gets farmed down by Shadow Ampharos. Opponent is going to send in Shadow Walrein, and these Volt Switches are tearing through Walrein's HP. I will commit the shield, I just need to farm up to the back-to-back Brutal Swings, and here, we're in a very comfortable position. Brutal Swing will get the shield. I'm going for Brutal Swing number 2 immediately. I just need the damage on the Walrein. This should put it into a range where I can Volt Switch down. They transfer the Volt Switch onto the POLIWRATH, but it's not going to matter. This Volt Switch goes through, so I can shield, and the Walrein gets KO'd. Hopping into the next match, picking up a pretty neutral lead, CLEFABLE into Pidgeot. CLEFABLE does win the zero shields here, but I am going to save switch into Double, and again, my opponent is going to respond with POLIWRATH. Part of why I wanted to run this team was I was seeing POLIWRATHs absolutely everywhere. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to build a team where every Pokemon on the team has a good matchup. And again, I make it to the back-to-back Wild Charges, so unless they want to give up Switch, they're going to have to give me shield advantage. And that's exactly what they do. And now I can send back in the CLEFABLE. CLEFABLE is going to look for the incredibly aggressive Fairy Wind farm down. They fire off the Skull. Do we see the attack drop? We do. I'm a little worried I'm not going to be able to make the farm down, so I decide to go for the Meteor Mash. It's resisted, but of course it will KO. In the back, opponent has Cresselia, and oh boy, they are core broken by Shadow Ampharos in the back. As Ampharos, of course, Brutal Swing will hit for nice super effective damage onto the Cresselia. Cresselia goes for the CMP tie, and that's going to cost them as I get an entire Volt Switch for free. I'm farming up, going for the Brutal Swing. Nice catch by my opponent, catching the Brutal Swing onto the Pidgeot. Unfortunate news for them is that is not going to be able to save them. I'm going to fire off the Brutal Swing into the Pidgeot. This will not KO, but it will put them into a range where one Volt Switch will KO. I can tank whatever they throw. They full send the Brave Bird, and I'm going to send in my CLEFABLE. CLEFABLE will be able to tank whatever they throw here. It's going to be the Grass Knot. CLEFABLE continuing to farm. They're firing off another charge move. Honestly, I'm slightly worried that they may make it to a third Grass Knot. This is going to be close. I'm firing off the Meteor Mash here, expecting my opponent is going to have to shield. They call the bait. This is not good. Here, I should have just committed to the farm down. For some reason, I thought they were able to save that Pidgeot on 1 HP in the back, but either way, it's not going to matter as CLEFABLE farms down and secures the win. We see a great lead in the next match, CLEFABLE into Virizion. Opponent is going to save switch into Ampharos. I don't have a hard check to an Ampharos save switch, so I'm going to stay in with CLEFABLE and fire off the Moonblast. This will hit for big damage if it lands, which it does, and now I switch into Shadow Ampharos at the last second to absorb this charge move. And I'm very happy I did as they full sent the Zap Cannon, but since Ampharos resisted, I'm able to tank the move, make it to the Brutal Swing, and Brutal Swing will grab the knockout. The one unfortunate thing here, however, is that our switch timers are very misaligned. I'm not able to make the Zap Cannon, so I'm forced to settle for the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing, not going to be doing much of any damage here. I am going to be waiting the timer and then sending in Clefable, but my opponent can switch and I cannot. So I'm going to be firing off the Moonblast with Clefable. I'm just needing to burn this switch clock, and then I can send in Dubwool. Of course, I am not running Payback. Normally, I do run Payback on my XL Dubwool, which would be really nice to have in this situation, but I'm actually running Wild Charge with this particular team. I don't want to lower my defense just yet, so I am just going to go for the Body Slam. Opponent will respect it with a shield. Of course, they do not know that I'm not running Payback. Future Sight does a lot of damage. I'm going to commit the shield, and I'm very happy that I did, as it's another Future Sight, and I'm going to start firing off Wild Charges. Wild Charge not going to be enough to KO here, but it will deal some solid damage. Here, I decided to fire the Body Slam just because I'm trying to stall the clock, watching for the potential switch into that Virizion. I'm debuffed, so this is going to KO me here, so I am going to let that through. Opponent is running Moonblast. In comes Clefable, answered by the Virizion. Now, Virizion does have energy from earlier. They fire off the Leaf Blade, and oh boy, this could get a bit dicey. They're firing off the Leaf Blade. I'm going to no-shield that as well, farm up 2 Fairy Winds, and fire off the Moonblast. This is less than ideal timing, but since it KO'd, thankfully, that double kick does not register, and I make it to the Meteor Mash, and this should be game over. Meteor Mash puts the Kraz on 1 HP, and it's a tie. Moving into the next match, leading XL Clefable into Shadow A/Slash. This right here is one of the matchups that helped convince me as to how absolutely absurdly strong XL Clefable is. Clefable has a massive type disadvantage here, but it can actually win the Zero Shield versus Shadow A/Slash. As you're going to see, 2 Meteor Mashes are more than enough to KO, whereas 2 Drill Runs are not going to cut it. I'm going to fire off the Meteor Mash, putting some pressure onto my opponent. Meteor Mash will be shielded. I'm going to pivot into Dubwool. Opponent ends up throwing on alignment, giving an entire double kick for free. They have to switch out or they're getting farmed down. Opponent sends in Giratina, and oh man, I really wish that I had Payback here. Unfortunately, all my charge moves are either going to be single or double resisted here, so I'm just going to fire off the Wild Charge. Wild Charge will get a small amount of chip damage. I'm not going to make 2 more, so I'm just going to fire off the Wild Charge. May as well get the chip damage that I possibly can. And the good news is, I've now put this close to a range where I can KO with Brutal Swing. I'm going to send in Clefable. I'm going to shield. They end up going for the Dragon Claw. I'm looking to farm up with Clefable. The important thing is that even if they shield this, the Fairy Winds have now gotten it into Brutal Swing range. Moonblast will be shielded. I get an attack drop as well. Opponent sends in the A/Slash, and I respond with the Ampharos. I will need to shield here, as Drill Run would do massive damage, but I get the farm down, and now I'm very close to a move. Giratina not going to be denied. They're firing their energy. They go for the Ancient Power, hoping for the boost, but it does not happen. I overfarm to the back-to-back Brutal Swings. I want to leave with energy to threaten whatever's in back. Brutal Swing KOs. It's a Tapu Fini in the back, and this game is so over. Shadow Ampharos makes it to the Zap Cannon. Get that Tapu out of here, and that's a good game. Picking up a very nice lead in the next match, Clefable into Defense Deoxys. Something that I've noticed is a lot of Deoxys lead teams are often ABA weak to Clefable, because Clefable can do very well versus Deoxys. It does win all even shielding situations, and on top of that, Clefable typically does well against at least one thing they have in the back. They're staying in this matchup, which does kind of add credence to the thought that they very well could be weak here. I'm farming up quite a lot of energy with Clefable, and I am full sending another Moonblast. Putting pressure on that shield. Opponent is going to let that through. They fire off the last second charge move here. Opponent goes for the Psycho Boost. They may make it to another, so I'm actually going to save Clefable for later and catch onto Dubwool. Dubwool absorbs the debuff Psycho Boost. I get the farm down. Opponent does not want to be switch locked, and they send in Guzzlord. And now we see they are ABA weak to Clefable. I'm firing off the Body Slam. That gets some solid chip damage. And the nice thing is Dubwool does win CMP over Guzzlord. Guzzlord goes for the Dragon Claw. They're not going to be able to farm down without me making 2 more Body Slams, which is quite nice for me. I'm going to fire off the Body Slam. That's going to connect onto the Guzzlord. Guzzlord, very nice counting. Firing off the Dragon Claw to deny the Body Slam. Their Guzzlord cannot farm down my Clefable, so I'm just going to send in Clefable here, and let's see what they want to do. Opponent is going to send in their final mon, which is Shadow Snorlax. I fire off the Moonblast, guaranteeing big damage or a shield, and now with shield advantage, I can send in Shadow Ampharos. Ampharos farming up. I have 2 shields, I may as well start using them, so I'm going to shield up the Body Slam and build up to the Zap Cannon, but I'm going to go for the back-to-back Brutal Swings. Even if my opponent calls this, at this point, what I'm looking for is chip damage, and that's exactly what I get. They're firing off a Body Slam, I am able to live a Body Slam here, which is quite nice, and then I'm farming up to the back-to-back Brutal Swings. So now, I'm in a pretty okay position. I fire off the Brutal Swing, I get the shield, beautiful catch by my opponent, and I'm going to undercharge the Brutal Swing, just hitting 4 bubbles because I need the perfect farm down to win. Clefable gets the farm down, in comes the Snorlax, and Clefable with 1 HP remaining takes out the Snorlax and secures the win. We see a familiar lead in the next match, Clefable into Pidgeot. Same game plan as before, I'm just going to save switch into Dubwool. Pidgeot staying in this matchup, so I'm just going to go for the Wild Charge here. Wild Charge isn't super commonly run, so I'm hoping they won't respect it, but they do. That is definitely not ideal for me. I'm debuffed, I'm just going to call a bait here. They have to Brave Bird to KO, and they do exactly that. Fair play to my opponent, as they do end up going for the Brave Bird. I'm waiting my clock, I'm sending in Shadow Ampharos. Opponent sends in a Poliwrath, and it's actually a Mudshot Poliwrath. That is not something I've seen since the Calm Day. Opponent may have brought in the wrong Poliwrath. I go for the Zap Cannon, and unfortunately they shield. The good news is I'm able to get a catch onto Clefable, and it ends up being a catch of a Dynamic Punch. But the unfortunate thing here is that Mudshot generates energy very quickly, so they're going to be able to make a lot of these charge moves. They make it to the Scald. I'm farming up with Clefable, and man, Mudshot able to make another Scald. That's going to get Clefable very low, and I'm going to fire off the Moonblast just to get rid of the Poly. I do leave with some residual energy here, but I am debuffed, which is unfortunate. In the back, it is Cobalion, and I am going to fire off this Moonblast. It's debuffed, so it's not going to do a lot of damage, but now I can bring in the Ampharos. The unfortunate thing is that they're going to be able to make a lot of Sacred Swords here, and my Brutal Swing basically does no damage. I need to make it to the Zap Cannon if I want to get rid of the Cobalion, and that's a lot of energy. So I'm going to farm up, fire off the Zap Cannon. This will be lethal, and now my opponent is going to need to Brave Bird with the Pidgeot to get the KO. Pidgeot able to outpace. Oh no, I think I lose. Brave Bird gets the KO. In comes the Clefable. We cannot make the Meteor Mash, and we lose that game. Hopping into the final match, picking up a terrible lead, Clefable into Registeel. I save switch into Dubwool, and my opponent is going to respond with Virizion. Honestly, this is where I want to see it. If it's on the team, I need to see it on the lead, or I need to bait it out with the Dubwool. The Ampharos having that electric and dark offensive coverage is terrific against a lot of things, but it gets absolutely walled by Virizion, so it is good to bait this out. I'm going to try and make it to a third Body Slam, but my opponent says no. They fire off the Sacred Sword, and that will KO. Alright, I am going to be sending in Clefable, and I'm just looking for the farm down. I'm looking to trade HP in exchange for a massive amount of energy that hopefully I can use later in the game. They're firing off another Leaf Blade. Again, I'm not going to be shielding. I'm just looking to get to 100 energy, and I do get the full 100. My opponent is going to be sending in the Reggie. I pivot into the Ampharos. Reggie not switching out. So you know what? I'm going to throw this Brutal Swing. I'm not building up to a Focus Blast here, but what I'm just doing is trying to desync the timer. My opponent shields. Based on that shield, I should have assumed this was a Zap Cannon. That's a bit of a misplay by me. Unfortunately, I do get debuffed, which is not what you're hoping to see. And with a debuff, now they can probably just go straight Focus Blast, and they do. Focus Blast does a lot of damage, but the fact that they're still not switching means they must be really weak to Ampharos in the back. Brutal Swing will be shielded. I continue to farm. Opponent goes for a Brutal Swing catch onto Pidgeot, but I'm able to hang on to my energy. One shot with the Zap Cannon, and now can Clefable become a Registeel counter? I fire off the Moonblast. That does some solid chip damage. Clefable so incredibly spammy with Fairy Wind. I'm in Moonblast number 2. That gets the Registeel deep into the red. I need to make it to a third Moonblast, and this is looking like Clefable is going to flip the script from a terrible lead to now Clefable dealing the killing blow as Moonblast takes down the Registeel, and that is a good game. All in all, I had a lot of fun getting to run Ultra League Clefable, and man, after losing to quite a few Poliwrath teams previously, it felt really good to be able to flip the script, and basically just let Poliwrath have absolutely nowhere to run. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.